Welcome to Joe's Happy Hour, a show about markets and life hosted by Joe Fahmy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be regarded as personalized investment advice or relied upon for any investment decisions. Joe Fahmy is an employee of Zor Capital, and he and his clients may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. All opinions expressed by Joe are solely his own and do not reflect the opinions of Zor Capital. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on this program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Emily Compagno, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I have to think for a second about calling you Joe and not just calling you Fahmy.
You can call me Fahmy. It's Joe's Happy Hour. We got an hour. You got to be happy. So that's not too hard for you to do. Let me do a quick intro for you. Co-host of Outnumbered, one of the highest rated shows on Fox News, host of the Fox True Crime podcast. You've worked as a criminal defense attorney, former Raiders cheerleader, current Joe Fahmy cheerleader, if that's accurate, and author of the instant New York Times bestseller, Under His Wings. What else haven't you done? It's amazing. I like to have my guests introduce themselves. If there's anything I maybe left out or something you wanted to let the audience know about yourself.
Oh, thanks for that. So I think most importantly of that list, yes, go Raiders, Raider Nation, because now we're in the seat of it here in Las Vegas. And for those wondering, absolutely, I am still a fan. But I think, when I think about accomplishments as we sort of say them or identify them in this world, I'm much more proud of being a wife and a daughter and a sister, and hopefully a good friend.
Yes.
I treated you to a smoothie earlier.
An amazing friend. She did treat me to a smoothie, so lucky me.
But it's truly my pleasure to be on. I'm so proud of you. I'm so thrilled to be on this podcast show. So thank you so much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. We have a lot to cover. I feel like we could probably talk for hours. But the first question I want to ask you is, you have an incredible gift. You have an incredible gift of always smiling and always being happy no matter what. So I think this just will resonate with the entire audience, because no matter who's listening, everyone's dealing with health issues, family issues, relationships, finances, everything. And I know you have a lot of things going on. You're live on TV. And what's amazing is you'll maybe the producer talking in your ear, focusing on what to ask the guests. You come back from commercial and you're like, everything's amazing and we're live. And not just on TV, you do that as well in our regular conversations. How do you do that?
Oh, that's sweet of you. I think first and foremost, faith, and being grounded in faith means you always have a perspective, or I always have a perspective of where favor comes from, where promotion comes from, where approval comes from. And it is certainly not in these earthly things. That's number one. And it also sort of develops into what, as we talk about accomplishments and we talk about things that we've done with careers, what I hold the most valuable is impacting others, serving as a messenger for others' good works. And so in that, the larger picture of what is fulfillment and what keeps you happy. And those things to me are derived from my faith. And in those relationships we mentioned earlier, and being a wife and a sister and a friend and all the things. And I'm also honestly just inherently happy. Like, I was born the way I am. So I am just 1,000,000% the youngest child, total optimist. Nothing gets me down. I know I have fits of rage. I am Sicilian, guys. But at the end of the day, I have always been a super happy, exuberant, enthusiastic, optimistic person. And I think growing as I grew into an adult, and especially in this industry, then having faith and knowing where my true North Star comes from, then that helps to maintain that perspective and maintain the balance and the attitude through all the stuff that this industry and this world throws at you, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, but do you have like any sort of I don't know if it's advice or technique where, I know I grew up, my brother did stand-up comedy and always trying to laugh and keep things on the light side. But as work hits you and life hits you, do you have something where if something hits you, I don't know, a breathing technique, or just you focus on something that gets you back in that, and we're live and everything's amazing? Because I see that and I admire that. I'm being honest. I admire that because I can't do that, and I'm trying to do that.
Well, I think, I guess there's two ways of, first of all, you could say fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
So let's say you can,
or
you're
just a great actress.
Right. So you can, even if you're feeling that rage still, just put that smile on your face and shine. And eventually it will sort of, I think, come to pass authentically. And then also, in those moments, if you're really talking about a second or two turnover, then yes, breath work, prayer, meditation, all of those are super important to calm your nervous system, because at the end of the day, if something really is a stress source and you're reacting in that way, then there's a physiological reaction that you can have control over to calming down your sensory system and ensuring that it really does get you back to a neutral place.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's an amazing gift. So that's cool that you're able to share that with us. Most people underestimate when they see you on Outnumbered, which is on noon Eastern. They see, okay, you're on for an hour and it's a live show and that's cool, but they underestimate the behind the scenes stuff. As far as like when I've done Fox Business or CNBC or whatever, it's a 5-minute hit. I go in a little bit early for hair and makeup, a little more, less hair and more makeup. But my point is, like, I go in, I do a little bit of a hit, and there's maybe other panelists, and it's easy pretty much, and I'm out. But take us through a typical day of all the getting in early, and there's more prep work for the show and producing the show, and then sometimes at the end of the day, you're done, you go work out, and then they call you in for a later show. I mean, take us through like a typical day for you.
That's a great question. So I'll just sort of talk about generally what it takes to have a news division / opinion show in that morning. So we're always fielding information. And you and I talked about earlier how to keep up with the information flow that can be obviously overwhelming, but also imperative at the same time to keep abreast of it so that we are, the whole point is we are the news, right? So it's incumbent upon us to be as contemporaneous as possible with truly what is breaking. So meaning at all times, I have sort of an onslaught of developing, breaking, and information coming at me. Developing or breaking news and information coming at me in the form of emails and generally speaking within our network. There are obviously different sort of listservs that we are a part of. So once you're plugged into that, then you're just getting constant emails of all of that stuff. And I'm also plugged into social media and other news outlets and networks and anything that's up to the minute data sources, so that at all times you're sort of fielding what's going on in the world. And there is an ongoing conversation with each show that when you turn on the news of what we're going to cover. And you can always make a plan, but as you know, a million times over, breaking news trumps breaking news. So
yes,
any plan can fly out the window if all of a sudden there's a, superseding event or presser that all of a sudden takes over. So notwithstanding that, then, like I said, we sort of plan and start to concretize then what's called the run of show. And then that we go into our segments, our different blocks. Every hour has a slightly different cadence of the blocks, we call them. So essentially what you watch before it goes to commercial break. And for our mornings, we get up early, we'll be fielding the information, talking back and forth, right? Sending pitches. And then we have a run of show meeting. The rundown comes out. We'll write our talking points or however everyone does their own preparation and studies and whatnot. And then it's also getting hair and makeup and then having to go down to the studio a little bit early to get mic'd up and do all the testing stuff. And then there's a quick turnover during just one commercial break before our set. And you're sort of, as you know, doing your mic testing and all the things. So I think at the end of the day, the most salient point is like the ongoing nature of it, as you know, that while a viewer might turn on the TV and that's their 60 minutes of watching or 30 minutes of news derivation, for us, it's an ongoing world that we're enmeshed in.
Yeah.
That sort of is why we can say, you know what? Nope. Last minute, we're going to switch everything around. B block is the new A, or breaking news. We're now going to start with this superseding event like we talked about, and everything else gets pushed down. So it's constantly in flux. I think that would be, if you had to follow this up with, is there any part of this that is the most challenging? It's that everything gets blown up all the time. So you might spend quite a bit of time preparing for one topic and we never even get to it. And it's the first one to be killed.
Yeah. You're asking the follow-up questions for me, so I don't even need to be here anymore.
Why are you even here?
Why am I even here? It's Emily's happy hour. That's what I was going to say. So you produce and you prep something, but then in the morning or maybe an hour before the show, you might have incredible breaking news.
30 seconds before the show or in the show too. It happens. It could be in a voice in your ear. All right, we're killing the next block. We're doing this. Like it is
And
Always.
Is that become overwhelming where you just have to, I mean, you're live on the air. It's not like this is pre-recorded. So whatever, if I screw up, we can edit it. But my point is like, is that become, again, going back to that calmness, how do you balance when that can be overwhelming, but you also have to be coherent on what you're talking about as far as the current news?
I'll be totally candid. My biggest issues with it, the hardest things for me are actually physiological. It is really hard for me to, and I think every human, to hear like specific instructions and really important ones while talking at the same time. And it's also oftentimes hard for me to pick up audially even what's being said to communicate that. So look, I am only speaking for myself. I'm not sure if this is everyone's, but like far more challenging for me than the concept of a new topic right away or something unfolding on the screen that we are all watching together and I have to narrate or identify or anything is literally me being like, wait, what did you just say? Or like, I can't hear what you're saying because I'm talking
So
at the
they're
same time.
talking in your ear while you're talking.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's
All the time.
that's not just you, that's everybody. I would be completely distracted. And you have a
Yeah.
camera on you and you're live
Totally.
and they're telling you.
So that to me, like the most
I
challenging
couldn't.
part is physiological or physical, I should say. The other part is pales in comparison for me. And look, it's I think this is a standard case of like, there are so many friends we have who have vocations where I'm like, I would die before having your job. Like I could never, do
Yeah.
X, Y, Z. Like, wow, like how nerve wracking, how challenging, how incredible, all the things. But I have zero problem being in front of the camera or talking or all that stuff. That stuff is like a true joy and
That's
passion.
the hardest part for a lot of people. And that's second nature to you because the number one fear when you survey people is public speaking
Right.
for humans. You know what number two is? Death. So people would rather die than get up in front of a camera or get up in front of an audience of 10, 200, 300 people. That's why I love stand-up comedy because you have to get in front of an audience and be funny. But now you're in front of a camera, in front of millions of people in their homes, and that's second nature to you. That's not even like, that would be what people would freak out.
Right. That's the not thinking twice.
That's another gift too. I always crack up when I try to like be cool and break news to you, and I'll say, "Hey, did you know so and so died?" And you're like, "Fahmy, I'm in a newsroom. I knew about that 3 hours ago."
I'm like, I knew before they did.
Exactly. And I'm like, and then I feel stupid. I'm like, well, did you know Elvis died? Like, I want to try to like come up with something that you might not have heard. But anyways, I forget that you're in a newsroom with sources where I'm just like, oh, I saw it on social media. Did you?
Our world is like Mission Impossible. We are like in the center of the globe.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I always appreciate it. It's hilarious. And yes,
I
you
know.
guys, Fahmy
No,
will text like, hey, did you know?
No more texts about that. So speaking of podcasts, so we have a lot of topics to cover. You're the host of the Fox True Crime podcast. First question, is it basically the husbands did it? Is whenever you look into every crime, the husband it's like every Dateline, the husband always did it?
That is literally what is on the mug that I gave everyone for Christmas because my senior producer always says that. She's like, the husband did it. The boyfriend did it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I always feel that way, but it's definitely a more often than not.
Tell me a little bit about how that podcast started and your experience with it.
What I'm most proud of in the podcast is that it's unique in that we really center the closest voice to the story, and also that we have a really varied amount of stories. And what I mean by that is, so, we have the sister of the missing. We have the prosecutor of the really sensational trial. We have at times, the criminal themselves. I've had a million different mobsters on, one of the most notorious art forgers in history, who was one of my favorite episodes, by the way. I had him on, in addition to the detectives who were there every step of the way that finally cracked the case. I've had many survivors on, and their stories are just incredible of what they went through, including, for example, the only surviving victim of a horrific Northeast serial killer who survived not only being stabbed dozens and dozens of times, but her baby survived because she was 9 months pregnant at the time. And was in just obviously a sort of life-changing episode. And I got to meet them, and that was really uplifting. So what you get with the podcast is not only these really varied stories, it's not just blood and guts, and it's not someone just reading a wiki page, but you really get the in-depth, visceral emotional story that I think isn't reciprocated in a lot of journalistic coverings of things, right? We get the emotions, and you have my background feeding into it. So you have the benefit of a former federal attorney and career criminal attorney who is asking the questions. And I always seek to do it in an empathic way where we're centering, what's the point of the story? So we center that, right? We're not there for like consumption of the drama. We're there to actually help something. And I'm sure you know that people ask all the time, like, why? What's the obsession with true crime? And studies have shown that part of it, the overwhelming reasons, are that people actually think that by consuming this material that they will be able to stave off something like it, that it equips them with how to survive, how to get away, right? All those things. And then a second large...
How to cover up their own crimes.
That too. And then the second majority is being able to participate in solving the cold case, being able to sort of provide some type of meaningful impact by either spreading the word or prevention. And then the third part is entertainment. We all tell ghost stories around the campfire and we all watch horror movies and all the things. So you can't deny the entertainment value, but I think it's worth totally noting that there's also sort of an altruistic and self-improvement reason behind the conception.
Yeah, you mentioned implementing your law background when you're looking at some of these cases. Do you miss practicing law and have any interest eventually going back to that?
I have maintained my licenses because my dad raised me in the way of saying never, like, you always have to have a backup plan. You always have to be able to put food on the table. So it's my backup plan. If this all goes to hell tomorrow, I'll be able to still be an attorney and put food on the table. But yeah, I miss it and I don't, because there are still a couple active cases that I'm a little bit dialed into. So I'm not totally cut off.
Okay.
In my current role, I do definitely conduct a lot of legal analysis in my opinions that I share. So I'm not totally divorced. I'm not completely outside of it. Sometimes I miss the positive impact. I don't miss the stress. And we talked about earlier how to combat stress. And I think part of it is being able to identify and articulate the differences and the meanings behind it. What is the source of stress? Are you in traffic? Are you battling a terminal illness? Those are different scenarios. Yeah. And I think the role that I'm in now, I take so seriously, and in no way is it less of a priority than my work as an attorney. But in my role as a messenger, in my role as hopefully an informer, as an educator in some ways, the stress there is less acute than being someone's attorney that is currently incarcerated or facing incarceration, right? That's a different level of responsibility, I'll say. So I don't miss that stress. I also don't miss the hideous suits.
I wanted to ask you about a really interesting and important interview you did recently. I don't want to get too political, and I want to keep the topic so nothing too controversial, so we can jump right into abortion if you want. No, I'm kidding. No, you interviewed President Trump on the Gutfeld show, and that was while he was running, and I thought that was pretty captivating. What was your experience with that? What was your takeaway from that?
Thank you so much for that. I just asked one question.
It's a great question too.
Thank you. As you said, it was during the campaign, and the question, I give all credit to my pastor, Gary Hamrick, who had been sharing with us the sheer volumes of evangelist Christians in our country who do not vote. And so the question was centered around, a candidate for president. And I laid out a few statistics. How many millions of people consider themselves evangelists in the country? How many don't vote? And essentially, what is your plan, sir, to capture that vote, if any?
Yeah, he loved that question. You could tell it was a very captivating question. Now, as far as interviews, you've interviewed and been on, whether it's panels or interviews on your show with so many people. Any person or two or three that stuck out as far as maybe funnier than you thought or engaging, or you're like impressed? Anyone like in particular? I don't have to isolate one, but even two or three.
I know, it's like picking a child, one of your kids. I'm like, I love them all and everyone's awesome. That's a great question.
Or anything that was memorable to you, because you sometimes it's just you've interviewed so many people. Anything that stuck. I know Mike Pence was on one time, and he's a very calm, and I'm beyond impressed about how calm. Speaking of calm, he's very calm. But anything like that you stuck out where you're like impressed by the person, or that was just funny and made you laugh, or we can just edit this out if you can't think of someone.
I wish you'd give it. I wish I'd had more time to think about it.
I can't prep you with the questions.
Not that I can't decide, identify someone, but more that I'm like. It's like a picture of Rolodex right now flipping through my brain. It's like, and I'm like, which one?
Well, that's why
of
I'm like,
hundreds?
Right, that came to your mind. Anything? No.
Well, you know what? Let's be germane to our prior conversation, and let's talk about the art forger, who was like the most delightful, hilarious raconteur I've ever met in my life. He was an incredible storyteller, and he just had me captivated the entire time as he described. A decades-long art forgery career, and then how he evaded not only FBI arrest, but essentially they were like, we don't have anything on him. And so he was always free. He was actually never prosecuted. And that was just, when you talk about unexpected and funny and entertaining and all the things, I think I will say that generally speaking, I've never quite been shocked or surprised at someone. And this also goes back to our, me, I'm a dog. I'm like, meaning everyone I meet, I'm like, hi, you're awesome. And you have to prove me wrong. So I am not surprised if someone is funny and charming and awesome, because that's how I go in meeting everyone, expecting them to be that way, right?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think I didn't know what to expect. But I didn't know what to expect with this, very sort of notorious criminal. And he was phenomenal. I was rooting for him the whole way. And I am confident that all the viewers were too. So I don't mean to rehash a prior topic, but I think that's a good explanation of an unexpected, delightful conversation.
That's cool. Anything funny that on air? I know sometimes when you're on the 5, you do some fun stuff at the end, but anything that, you're live and there's always going to be bloopers, outtakes, anything that stuck out at you as it's like any sort of funny incidents that might have happened on air? Well,
one time I was about to do a segment on Hannity. I was in the green room, and as you know, so I described earlier how it works when we do our own show, but when you come on someone else's show as a guest, then you'll get mic'd up and then you'll wait in the green room.
Yes.
And so you will, an attendant will come grab you very last minute. So you are not sitting on set watching the host for quite some time. You sit down in the chair and, oftentimes, as 20 seconds later is when you go.
Yeah.
So the point is, when you're sitting mic'd up in the green room and someone comes to get you, you have no more than 30 seconds, maybe 60, to walk into the studio and sit down and begin your hit. It's a very rapid transitional process. So I'm in the green room. I'm all mic'd up. It's live on Hannity. And I'm sitting at the table on the 12th floor, the one outside of M. I'm sure you've been there a million times.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm sitting there. You know how there's that table, and I have a cup of coffee, and Dion comes out to get me. He's the audio manager, and he's like, "All right, Em, time for your hit." And I'm like, "Okay." So similar to slamming the last of your beer before you, it's like, "All right, we're heading for the cab."
You spilled the coffee.
I shot the coffee, great, last sip of the coffee, and it missed my mouth. It was totally the scene from Airplane. And I was wearing a white.
Of course you're wearing white.
Yep. The knit, and it just went all over. And I'm not in any way exaggerating the volume. It was last sip, but drenched. And I, again, under this time pressure of in 30 seconds, I have to be sitting on national television. And I just look around. And by the way, it's, like I said, live. So this is prime time. So it's late at night. This isn't during the day when there's a million people around. And this poor, sweet girl was sitting in the green room. She was one of the green room attendants. And I just look at her and I was like, take off your shirt. So in an instant. So we swapped, everyone, turn around. And then sweet thing gave me her shirt. And then I went out on air wearing her. Thank goodness it wasn't totally not appropriate for a guest on air, but it was basically sort of a flowy top or whatever.
Did the job. And it was hilarious. And then I got a picture after so I can show it to you. I don't know if you guys have in your pod, if you can link it, but it's a hilarious picture where I'm pointing at the, because I put it back on. But that was it's
long story, but an example of like
right before you go on air, you spill coffee.
Totally.
All over you.
All over myself with no one to blame but myself.
Oh, that's hilarious. But you were able to salvage.
Dumped. Yeah, thanks to her. Now, because in my office upstairs, I keep my wardrobe, I keep everything. I certainly have a million stories of wardrobe malfunctions, but they're less dramatic because you just run upstairs and change.
Right.
Or, if you like accidentally mess up the color wheel and you're like, oh, we're both in the same color, I'll run in. It's less dramatic than like, whose outfit can I steal right now and swap? Thank goodness she was roughly my size too.
That's great. Have you ever thought about doing stand-up comedy? I know you have colleagues like Kennedy and Kat who do comedy and stuff, and obviously Jimmy's a great stand-up comic. Have you ever thought about it?
In summer school at NYU, I took a class called New York Humor, and the final sort of project was for us to all do stand-up comedy in I can't even remember which one it was. I wonder if it was
at a comedy club.
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
But it was elective, and at the time I was like, I don't need to. It's not really like I love going. I love going to stand up. We would go all the time. But I was like, but I don't really want to do it, and so I didn't. And now I regret it. I think that's one of the like, what's your regrets in life? There's like 3, but one might be that I didn't actually try it.
You have plenty of time though.
True.
There's no regrets. There's still time. So I have a really good friend here who runs a comedy club on Sunday nights here in Vegas in the Arts District. Sunday nights they do amateur night.
Oh my gosh.
And he's been bugging me for so long. He says it's 10 comedians, 10 minutes. And he's like, anytime you want to come up and do 10 minutes. Because he knows my brother used to do comedy, and I've never done it. I've just written stuff.
Wait, you've never done it? I feel like you do it all the time. What do you mean? You're hilarious.
I do it like when we're talking, but not stand up in front of a crowd.
Wait, you've literally never done it?
I've given speeches and stuff. Like I've given financial talks where I'll just throw comedy in there. But I've never been to an actual open mic stand up to do stand up. So I'll make a deal with you. If you come in and you do 10 minutes, I'll do 10 minutes.
Totally.
You would do it?
Done. If
we just won't tell anyone.
Allowed?
If you're allowed.
Cut to.
Because every time he bugs me, he's like, and 10 minutes is a long time. Because I tell him, I'm like, I got 4 good minutes in me. He's like, that's what she said. And I'm like, you're not helping your cause. You're not convincing me here. And he says, just work on 10 minutes. And if you do 10, I'll do 10. How about that?
Or we can share the 10.
Wow, that's fine. That's
if
perfect.
If you feel you don't have more than 5, you know what I mean? We'll just dip our toe in the water.
So maybe someday we'll both fill our, whatever bucket list of doing that.
Well, hopefully for you much sooner because you're hilarious and this is your world. So this Sunday, I hope to see you on stage.
One of these days. Any mentors? I know you've worked with a lot of people, whether it's people at work or any mentors that have, we've talked about Jimmy being a great mentor, as far as, a great comedic writer, and you told me he's helped you as well. Anyone that you can think of as far as that have helped you in your career? It doesn't have to be anyone at Fox. It could be even somebody from before that, with Raiders or anything like that. Yeah,
I was going to say that the most impactful mentors to me are not in this industry. They have all been attorneys or other Raiders. Definitely that. I think especially because, depending on your role, I'm a little more siloed in my current position, right?
Yeah.
But as an attorney coming up through the ranks, I had a few massively influential attorneys that I miss that relationship. That's the other thing. As you know, sometimes when you're in organizational structures and the higher you get, the more you realize you're a little bit isolated and you're a little bit lonely, but I love the mentoring relationship. I thrive under that. I'm always asking questions and how did I do? So I really do love that. I mean, definitely my executive producer right now, Melissa, she's amazing and I learn from her every day. So in no way do I want to discount that. But when you talk about sort of lifetime mentors, there have been a few attorneys that have just absolutely stood out. And, I think also you can sometimes bleed mentorship into influence, and the major influences on my life have been and remain my parents and my sisters as well. I grew up just in a very healthy structure with them, and I still to this day, their voices are the ones in my head telling me to do things and guide.
Yeah.
All the things.
There's so many other topics here. I'm just don't even know where to take this.
Whatever you want.
Let's talk really quick about your workout routine, because you keep yourself in amazing shape. My workout routine is very consistent. I work out Monday, I work out Tuesday, and Wednesday I take 3 weeks off. And I'm really consistent during those 3.
I probably blew out the microphone.
You blew out everyone's ears. I take 3 weeks off. I do 10 sets of crunchy tacos, 10 sets of soft tacos, everything. No, you keep yourself in great shape. Tell the audience is there anything specific that you stick to with, to look so great on TV and everything, and health-wise and everything?
I'll pay you in cash after this. I went from being, obviously a dancer since I was 3, cheered in the NFL. And so all of my workouts were really studio based. And I'd also grown up, playing soccer and horseback riding and the like. So everything was sort of activity based and studio based. So I was doing things like Mega Reformer and Soul Cycle and, dance classes and things like that. And it wasn't until I started getting into heavy lifting that, especially as we age, and then looking into the science, and I'm not in any way purporting to know very much at all about it, but I follow and have a few coaches who do. And the reality of building as much dense muscle tissue as possible, and that you could really only do that by heavy lifting. So once I started incorporating true heavy lifting with cardio simply for my enjoyment, like I bike back and forth to work and things like that, then that really is what changed my body composition. I still do studio stuff because I love it, and I love the emotional connection, being in group classes and with other girls, doing all that kind of stuff is like brings me joy. But the heavy lifting and actually like doing a macros eating lifestyle with a working out in the gym and lifting in hitting PRs, so progressively getting more and more, lifting heavier and heavier weights, or breaking any type of PR, whether it's sets or speed or whatever.
Okay.
Like my body didn't like that is what had the greatest impact.
Yeah, it's interesting because Dr. Peter Attia, who 30-year cancer surgeon who wrote another New York Times bestseller, anyways, New York Times book Outlive. And he's one of the experts in longevity. And his 4 keys are sleep, intermittent fasting, when you eat clean, and the last one is working out with weights. Because as we get older, because he's not about living long, it's about making it to 80 or 90, but with quality of life where you can move around. And he says by having that muscle mass, it can prevent injuries from normal falls. And he's very, very big on weight training.
Absolutely.
For longevity. So that's cool too.
And those other ancillary things too, like the vitamin D, and you're right about the sleep and cold plunges and inflammation reduction and things that are vastly important to your overall health as we age that will retain. People try to find like what's the secret to looking young and trying to pump their faces full of stuff or do this. But the reality is if you build your muscle tissue, get your rest, and eat a ton of protein, at least like I try to average around 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, or a little less than that.
Okay.
Like those are things that were very impactful to me.
Do you ever drink the apple cider vinegar at all? You're into that at all?
I used to in like high school. You know
okay.
what I mean? I'm like in high school.
The
Fahmy.
reason I bring that up
Definitely.
because another Dr. Eric Berg, who has an amazing YouTube channel, it's something I heard like literally a month ago, and it just as a reminder. He says like put a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar with cinnamon and put it in water and sip it throughout the day, and it reduces. It's like natural Ozempic. It reduces your cravings for carbs and regulates your blood sugars.
Great.
And I swear I've been doing that for like the last month or so since I heard that. It's one of those things where same thing. I think I did apple cider vinegar in high school and then I heard it again and now I do it and it tastes horrible. It's like worse than, I don't know if it's like Rumple Mints or like some horrible shot that we take, but it's, just a little bit with water. And I found it to be very helpful. I found it to like kind of kill cravings. So anyways, just passing that along for anyone who cares.
I have a friend who's obsessed with buying everyone Rumple Mints shots every time we're together, which is far too often. And it is like heinous.
Oh, it's like Jaeger, all that stuff. It's like when I'm drinking apple cider vinegar, it's like I'm doing a horrible shot of something.
I'll say this also, that I think a lot of and as we know, decades have popular trends and whatnot, and deprivation is something that a lot of people exist in, or they sort of revert to deprivation to, get to a certain number on the scale or a certain look. But you really have to get more into a mindset of satiation and get away from the numbers. And even I'll get fixated on numbers of like, how much can I lift today? And then that's why I messed up my back a couple weeks ago, as you know, and had to go to physical therapy. Like you have to get rid, or this is what I do for myself, to get rid of these numbers so that short of the stuff that you're calculating for yourself, like we talk about the macros and protein intake, that kind of calculation, yes. Calculation of like a number on the scale, no. No one should be depriving themselves, because at the end of the day, to your point about longevity, what does health look like? What does longevity look like? What does quality look like over quantity? Then it has to do with all the things we've been talking about, your muscle tissue. And your
Great
strength.
stuff. Let's jump into your book. Showing the camera. I'm so good. It's like The Price is Right.
Serious you've ever been.
Under His Wings. You've done a lot of interviews on this book, so we don't need to like rehash. So I feel like, you've probably done so much stuff. Okay. Amazing, instant New York Times bestseller. I know you've probably been asked all these questions, but what, tell the background behind it, what inspired you to write the book? And I have some follow-up questions, which you'll probably anticipate anyways. But give the audience the background behind the book.
I'm only pausing because as you hear all of those beeps, and do you need to pause to have that be edited out? It went away now.
Okay.
It sounded like an ice cream truck from right over
Oh, that's
here.
why you paused. You thought it was an ice cream truck. You wanted to go get ice cream. I know. No, keep this in. Don't edit it. She wanted to get ice cream. You want to go get ice cream, and we can come back.
Copy. Sorry, this is your show. Oh, sorry, it's your show, not mine.
It's funny.
I'm like,
I know it's like explores the role of faith with military personnel and how that. But I'll let you. You're like, it's my book.
clearly you didn't read it.
Clearly, I didn't read it. No, I just. Did the receipt come out while I opened the book? That would have been great if the receipt came out.
It's only the cover, and on the inside it's like another book. You're like,
exactly. It's a coloring book. Kidding.
It's really 3 books in one. And so one thread throughout, I come from a really strong military history family, and growing up, what adorned my walls, in addition to, U.S. citizen certificates and diplomas and things like that, were all of our family photographs and our medals. So when you open that book, on the end papers, that's all my family's medals. And because my mom is a genealogist, she calls herself a family storyteller, I knew all of these stories. I knew the stories of my great-great-grandmother who lost her son, my great-great-uncle Joe Lorenz, in World War I. He made the ultimate sacrifice. And 1 World War later, in World War II, my great-great-grandmother, watched her daughter deploy for 1.5 years to Europe as an anesthetist nurse, basically on the front lines, and had occasion. President Calvin Coolidge ran a 2-year program, the Gold Star Mothers Pilgrimage, and they took widows and Gold Star mothers and sailed them to Europe to see where their husbands and sons had died and were buried. And so she got to go. And she was profiled actually in a magazine that's also in the book. Everything in the book has meaning. Every photo, everything has meaning, even if it doesn't have a caption, which the cover of Liberty didn't there.
You integrate a lot of your own personal and family stories into the book as well.
Exactly.
From your family's military background.
Totally.
Okay.
And so those stories are all in there. So that's an example. So the one book within is the very detailed family stories of mine. That's interwoven too with history. Because, for example, my great Aunt Lou, who I just mentioned, she wrote letters home that we saved. So we have an incredibly detailed account of, again, being what it's like to be a frontlines nurse at that time. And so much of it, we love laughing. So much of it is funny because really she couldn't detail too many war stuff, right, that wouldn't have been approved. So it's more the color, which is even more, I think, fascinating and new because you can get from history books the dry stuff. And she talks about asking her mom to send vodka and gin in shampoo and conditioner bottles because it was too expensive in France. I mean, it's hilarious. I'm like, no wonder where I came from. So it's so great. And then the second sort of thread, while with Raiders, I had the honor of visiting the deployed troops in Iraq and Kuwait in 2009. And we spent 2 weeks in country, an incredible experience to serve as an ambassador, carrying millions of Americans' goodwill and support to these young men and women overseas who were deployed. And we had on our itinerary visiting a forward operating base called Sadr City, or named Sadr City.
Used to be called Saddam City. Did you know that?
Sadr City used to be Saddam City?
Formerly called Saddam City.
No way.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that.
I did read your book, by the way.
And
anyway,
everyone was shocked that was on our itinerary. There's no way 5 cheerleaders are going to Sadr City, Baghdad. There must be a mistake. They've never had a visitor before. It's super dangerous. Yeah. You guys are not going. And the guys there were like, there's no way they're coming. You know, any visitor we've had, we shoot at. Like, this is not, we've never had a celeb. We've never had a VIP guest. But lo and behold, we went there and it was awesome, obviously. We had a great time with the guys. Our helicopter, the Black Hawk that was to take us back to the main base, was diverted for a medevac. So we ended up spending the night. And we called it the Sadr City Slumber Party. And we never went to bed. We just stayed up, pulled an all-nighter in the courtyard with the guys. And it was like summer camp, you know, where like it's like you're sitting around, you're just laughing, telling jokes, telling stories from home the whole time. It was awesome. And we left there being like, that was totally the best night of the trip. And it was one of my favorite nights ever because it was, you know, when else do you get to have an all-nighter with a group of friends other than summer camp and high school? You know what I mean?
They must have been inspired and everything, just elated from.
So normal.
Yeah.
Which I think was, you know, for those guys to have a bit like to just have friends for a night that felt like home.
The humility from the soldiers in the book was beyond, I can't even say inspiring is too much of an understatement, but did you find pretty impressive, the humility from the soldiers?
Of course.
Yeah.
And so that after in the wee hours of the morning when we did get a Black Hawk that returned us home, you know, we sort of had to run out because it's really tight timelines. So and then in the wee hours of the morning when the Black Hawk did return, and you know, the transitions were really tight, so we barely had any chance to say thank you properly. All of a sudden it's just like, it's go time, go, 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 you know, love you guys, like, you know, Sadr City sleepover and all the things and like, you know, Team C, we're out, bye. We run away and we learned later that for 3 days, like it was all the guys could talk about. Like it was the best time ever. It was so fun, so special. And 3 days later, they ran over an IED. And the colonel who had been in charge of us all evening, who said, when we got stranded, I have 3 daughters at home. I'm not going to bed until you girls are safely out of here. He lost his legs and his life many times, being resuscitated each time. And then after the 9-hour medevac, because it was in the middle of a dust storm, on the way back, the guys ran over another IED, and Sergeant Timothy David lost his life. And he was younger than I was, and it was his 6th tour of duty. And 15 years later, Colonel Tim Karcher and I reunited, and our story is in the book.
Yeah.
And so that's the second book that I mentioned that's in there. And then the third are the extraordinary voices of the warfighters within who tell their deeply intimate experiences with God on the battlefield, in combat. And it broadens out of what the home front looks like and what warfighters are. It includes as well a Gold Star mother, a spouse of a catastrophically wounded soldier. So there are, you know, chaplains, minister. It's all varied. Combat medics. So there's a whole constellation of military service members and their families and their perspectives, their piece of the pie of combat. And we cover many different conflicts. So as far back as obviously World War II with my family stories, but then in terms of the live interviews, the Korean War, Vietnam, my great cousin who was in Pearl Harbor, all the things through the global war on terror and to present day, and what moral injury looks like and whatnot. So those are the 3 tenets of Under His Wings.
It's a great blend of historical analysis and stories starting from World War I, going through all of these different wars, Korea, Vietnam, and so forth. It's a great blend of the history with your own personal experience and the interviews with the soldiers. It's like you said, it's not just reading a history book, which is really cool. What is 2 quick follow-ups? What's your, I guess, not maybe surprising takeaway or feedback that you've got? I'm sure you've got amazing feedback, obviously being a New York Times bestseller, but anything that surprised you as far as that you weren't expecting from this? And the second question is, are you thinking about writing another book?
Answering the first, being a #1 New York Times bestseller, I mean, I'll never forget that call and where I was. And I cried all the way up 6th Avenue because I was on my way to catch the bus, obviously. Well, first I was in the nail salon, so I couldn't have the reaction that I wanted. Like I sort of had to be muted. And then I came out into the street. And you know how in New York, you just live your life out on the street because all of our apartments
people are crying in nail salons and walking in the streets in New York.
100%.
And that's normal.
Right, because there's no room in our apartments to do anything. So I was just like sobbing with joy, walking up 6th Avenue and, you know, called my husband and my dad and my sister and my mom. And just it took a while to sink in, because the whole point is I knew how extraordinary these voices are, and I knew how incredible their stories of faith and God's blessings are, and to feel like all of my prayers had at least in that moment had been answered, that meant that the world would be able to read their stories. It meant that the world would be able to be exposed to how incredible God is. Like, that is why I was crying and so happy and thankful and excited. And that, I think, goes into our conversation in the beginning about having perspective. And there's a thirst for faith, I feel, in the American public. And I also think right now in our current times, there's a freedom many people feel to be able to worship or speak freely about their faith. I certainly do. And that gives me such great encouragement. And all of the feedback, again, I wouldn't say like surprising, but what has been such a blessing, the feedback that so many people are encouraged in their faith by the stories within, and encouraged to talk about their faith, especially in the military, which is a thread too, as you've read, like bringing back those conversations that up until now might have been sort of taboo. So that to me is just the incredible blessing that keeps being so rewarding and keeps amplifying the effect of this. And then on that personal side, to know that I carry the number one, like, it's like, having the heavyweight championship belt. Like, I'm like, you get it once, I have it forever. And that's just the most humbling thing. Because I prayed every day that I would like tell their stories accurately and adequately, that I would serve them, that I would serve these people who gave everything for our country. Like, I just wanted to, I just prayed, please God, let me honor them by being adequate for them. So the only feedback I cared about was every voice in that book. And the feedback that I got, like having, POWs crying to me with gratitude after that I had gotten it right. That's all the approval I need. And the number one part to me, it was for them. It's like bringing home the gold medal for like your country, right? It was like, it's for them. And so, another book, no, this took a lot out of me. And I'm still, I'm going on tour for the book. And a lot of what I present is all the material that didn't make it in the book. And so I'm still intent on messaging these stories. Oh, yeah. No, I don't.
You're like, let me enjoy this for a second. I get that.
Still on my main course. Don't bring me dessert yet.
But I mean, have you thought maybe down the road a second book on a totally different topic? Maybe like a life personal story, something like that, maybe. Or your journey, something like that.
I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't, but at the same time, having just gone through that,
let's get through this.
The
first.
PTSD is still real. I mean, I'm like, oh my God, I can't even, like the thought of like, I can't talk about all-nighters. There were a lot of those where I was like typing all night and freaking out. So I think the thought of that sounds very exhausting and far in the future.
I applaud anyone who's written a book, because I know that the time and the effort and the rereading and making sure it's perfect and rewriting and it is a lot of effort to it. So it's amazing. Everyone should please go and pick up a copy. Order multiple copies too. That's what I did. There's so many other topics, but we kind of have to wrap this up. We can talk about the Raiders. We can talk about just so many other things. Your cars, you're being a big car buff. But I wanted to make sure to bring up your canine charity that you're affiliated with, Canine Hurricanes Heroes. We have a mutual friend here who has taken in so many rescues, not just humans, but dogs as well. But talk a little bit about, I know it's special to a lot of us here, the Canine Hurricanes Heroes and your involvement with that.
Thank you so much for that opportunity. And yeah, I mean, find me anyone who doesn't love a dog.
Yeah.
Well, if you do, they're probably a serial
killer. We won't like them.
They're not invited back. So look, the reality is that many people don't understand or know, I certainly didn't, that your tax dollars pay for working canines veterinary care only while they are in service. But many of them, in fact, I think the majority of them, have to be medically retired at some point, oftentimes because of injuries they've sustained on the job. So we all remember in 2012 when President Obama was home with his family and so we all remember in 2014 when President Obama was home with the first family and there was an intruder who jumped the fence.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
High on a lot of things, so sort of had that superhuman strength that we read about.
Yeah.
And live on, actually Fox, local Fox, live on television, this guy jumped the fence and the ERT team, so the canine units of SWAT. All of this unfolded live on TV, which was him running across the lawn and then the dogs being deployed to get him. And Canine Hurricane, who was handler Marshall Merarkey's dog, got into a brutal fight with this guy. And we all watched this live unfold. And the guy was beating Canine Hurricane because he had this like superhuman strength that was horrifying.
Oh,
he was
wow.
lifting up Hurricane and body slamming him down. And the dog, ultimately, as dogs do, he did not fail and he was successful. And that's the thing about canines is they're such force asset multipliers and they do not fail. And Canine Hurricane didn't. So live on TV, not only did America watch a canine hero take down a White House intruder that literally was making his way to the first family, but also they watched the dog get beaten within an inch of his life. And later, by the way, when the man was carried to the hospital, or, ambulanced to the hospital, the surgeon there, the ER physician, had been a combat medic and said he'd never seen injuries so like gnarly as what Canine Hurricane did to this guy. And after that, Canine Hurricane had to be medically retired because the injuries he suffered in that beating, he couldn't sustain his work being an officer in the Secret Service.
Yeah.
And that's when the handler learned that he had to cover all the vet bills on his own for the rest of his life. Now, at that time, nonprofits stepped in and took care of him. So he himself was covered and he realized, never again do I want a handler to have to make a life or death decision or a care decision for an officer of the United States because of his financial situation, and launched Canine Hurricane's Heroes, which I've been honored to be an ambassador for since that day. And they raise money and take care of dogs.
Police and military retired canines.
Yep. Police
Okay.
and military, they've covered all branches, and really incredible success stories. And Canine Hurricane went on to be the most awarded U.S. working canine in American history. He just passed away earlier this year, and there, had such a dignified transfer after in the White House and all the accolades he deserved. But here's what's most important for your listeners' takeaway is that the point of every nonprofit is not to exist anymore. Right? The point of every charity, hopefully, is to fill the gap that will ultimately be plugged by not just our, the philanthropy of others, but that the problem will be solved. And there is right now a bill in Congress that would ensure that working canines get their veterinary bills paid for after retirement. So please do call your congressperson. It matters and it helps. And we have bipartisan approval. It's a bipartisan bill. No one is against this, obviously. We just need to have it pass, and then legislation will be passed, and then Canine Hurricane Heroes can go on to different things. But that's the legacy, the most important legacy that's meaningful to the nonprofit is having the honoring our Canine Heroes bill pass.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for letting me share that.
That's amazing. I'd like to close with any sort of advice or lessons for anyone who's watching, inspired by maybe wanting to get into your line of work or inspired by your energy or anything. I don't know if it's a combination of advice you'd give them or things you wish you told yourself if you could go back 10 years or something like that. Like just life advice that you could give, a couple of 2 or 3 things.
I think that a couple that would be the like game changers for how I got to where I am is truly never take no as the final answer. All it takes is one yes. And we have all suffered massive rejection over and over, you especially. Massive rejection over and over again.
That's the most accurate thing you've said.
And, if we all let that first no prevent us from moving forward, none of us would be anywhere. So I assure you, I had a million no's before I had one yes, so that one yes is all that matters. And it's important to just reload. And what does that mean? So be organized about what you're pursuing, be diligent, be obviously determined, work hard, all the things. But you have to keep at it, and you keep at it because energy is undeniable. Like it will come to fruition. You will achieve your goals. You just have to keep at it. And I also think being true to yourself, as perhaps basic as that sounds, there was plenty of advice given to me during the course of my career that I did not take. It's important to be discerning in what is important for you. So there were plenty of things that I was told I had to do, I had to be, and I had to get, and I did not because
your
I didn't
instincts
want to.
just told you that that was not the right advice.
Yeah. And just like, I didn't want to. And it wasn't for, as obviously, it wasn't for lack of ethic or energy. But the whole point is like being discerning, like, this person telling me, oh, this is what you have to do. And I think my trajectory, it was my own playbook. There was zero, I was an attorney that became a cheerleader, that continued to be an attorney, that then became a legal analyst and then became a host. Like, it's not, I'm not a journalist in the sense of, oh yeah, you start in the lower markets and then you work your way up, right? So my point is the playbook that I created was totally unique and on my own. So I had the capacity and the ability to reject advice. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right for me. Yeah. But also because I'm like, I just, people who are like, oh, you have to have a Facebook. I didn't want a Facebook and I didn't create one. I still don't have one. And I'm where I am today, right? That's a tiny example of, So ensure you are true to yourself while pursuing your goals, and knowing that sacrifice takes many forms, but there is no way you should ever sacrifice who you are or your values or anything like that, because that is totally unnecessary. And then I would think in my current chapter, my most salient piece of advice, besides the perspective we talked about earlier and having faith, is balance, because that's my room for improvement right now. I don't have the kind of balance I wish I did. So I think the more we work and the more we get where we are, the more that there's room for your entire life to be taken over by work. And so I would say protect yourself, protect your boundaries. Maybe
learning how to say no when you're getting pulled in so many different directions and demanded by so many different people. You have to pick and choose.
Totally. Yeah. Perfectly said. Because I really had to learn how to do that. Really had to learn. And I'm still learning. I'm still struggling with that.
So you got 1,000 no's. Now you have to give back 1,000 no's.
Totally.
To make your time more efficient. I can't thank you enough for doing this.
I didn't do anything. Fahmy, I love you. I'm so proud of you. This is like phenomenal.
This is a great, our producer Tyus is amazing. He's one of the best in the business. And he's graced us with this great studio, which I'm having fun doing this, having fun doing great conversations. I can't thank you enough for your friendship, for your support, for your love. Thank you for the smoothie. Mm-hmm. And everyone, please go out and get this #1 New York Times bestseller under his wings. And hopefully we can do this again soon with some other friends, some other rock stars, and have some other fun conversations.
Can I say one more thing?
Please, I'll give you the closing words.
I want everyone to understand the kind of person Joe Fahmy is. He's the connective tissue to a million different friend groups. He's the common denominator of like joy and exuberance. And you talk about me being optimistic, but you bring the joy to so many of us. And it's like having a Joe Fahmy in your life is having an extraordinary blessing. And you've, ever since we met millions of years ago and became instant best friends, like you have brought into my life just a shine and meeting other people. Like the world that surrounds Joe Fahmy is unlike any other world, and it's based on generosity and joy and authenticity, and the people in your life are incredible. So I love that you have this podcast, because we all know you as, you're like a million people's best friends. Like there's like 100 of us that are like, oh yeah, Fahmy's our best friend. But to have you now being able to share your voice and these sweet conversations with the world, I'm so excited for that, because I think, as I said, everyone should have a Joe Fahmy in their life. I'm honored to be your best friend. I'm honored to be here today. And I'm so excited that now all these people get to hear your little slices of your pie. Because we knew you were the stock market genius, but now this is like social Joe coming out. So I wish you the absolute best with this. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your grace, and that's an amazing blessing. So thank you so much for the kind words, and I look forward to doing this again soon.